Have you ever felt your calm slip away in an instant, as if one sharp word or one careless action from someone else could reach inside you and pull a thread you thought was secure? I've seen how easily a moment can shake even the strongest mind, how quickly peace can fracture. But I've also seen another path, a quieter one. Stay with me, and let's walk into it together. As we step into the first chapter, picture a quiet room where even the smallest sound feels like it can tip you off balance. A place where your thoughts echo louder than the world outside. In moments like that, have you ever wondered why one careless remark or one unexpected disruption can pierce so deeply, almost as if someone reached inside you and stirred something you didn't know was fragile? Calm seems simple until someone tests it, and they always do. Now imagine standing in front of a situation you cannot control, watching it unfold in ways you never asked for. You feel the tension rise, that instinct to push back, to defend, to explain, to react. But buried beneath all of that noise is a truth the Stoics learned thousands of years ago. Marcus Aurelius once wrote that the mind becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. What he meant was simple. The world reaches us only after our judgment interprets it. Without that judgment, events lose their power. They become lighter. They pass through us like wind through an open field instead of striking us like stones. I learned this the hard way. Years ago, I walked into a gathering feeling light, centered, ready for a peaceful night. Nothing remarkable. Then someone I knew, someone who often spoke more to be heard than to be understood, made a sharp remark about a decision I had made. It wasn't even severe. It was the tone, the smirk, the way he wanted the room to turn and see how I would react. And in that instant, my mind did what untrained minds do. It attached meaning where none was needed. It painted the moment with colors I didn't want to see. Suddenly, I felt the heat rise in my chest, that familiar urge to respond, to correct him, to reclaim something I thought he had taken. But here's the truth I missed back then. Nothing had been taken. Not really. He offered words. I offered weight. He threw a spark. I provided the fuel. And that is where the battle is always lost, inside the judgment we attach to the moment, not the moment itself. As Epictetus said, we are disturbed not by things, but by the views we take of them. It sounds like philosophy until life hands you a situation that presses exactly the right bruise. Then you understand it's not theory. It's survival, it's clarity, it's a shield no one can steal from you. The Stoics understood that our mind is either our master or our servant. When it reacts first, we suffer. When it waits, when it observes, when it pauses long enough to ask, is this really worth my peace? Something shifts. The world stops feeling like an enemy, and you stop feeling like a victim of every passing emotion. Think of a soldier holding his ground while arrows fly overhead. Not because he is emotionless, but because he knows panic will kill him long before any weapon does. That's what your calm is. A ground you either defend or surrender. Let me give you another story. A friend once described a moment at his office when a co-worker criticized his work in a tone that felt more like an attack than a suggestion. Everyone looked over. The air tightened. He felt the pressure to respond, to match the heat with heat. But instead, he breathed. One slow breath. He let the words hang in the space between them without absorbing them. When he finally spoke, he didn't defend. He simply asked, calmly, "What exactly would you improve?" The tone shifted instantly. The co-worker stumbled. The room softened. And the strange thing was this. It wasn't his response that calmed the moment. It was the space he created before responding. That space was the real answer. Calm is not the absence of emotion. It is the mastery of space. The space between the event and your judgment of it. Between the trigger and your story about it. Between the moment and the meaning you assign to it. Every time you lengthen that space, you reclaim yourself. Seneca once said that the greatest weapon against stress is our ability to choose one thought over another. He didn't say to change the world, or change people, or change fate. Only the thought, one thought. It sounds too small to matter, but it changes everything. And here's where the lesson deepens. Calmness is not passive. It is not weakness. It is not the absence of fire. It is choosing where the flames will burn. When you stop letting every spark ignite you, you become something rare in a world addicted to reaction. You become steady, grounded, unshakable, and people feel it long before they understand it. There's a quiet power in someone who refuses to be pulled into chaos, who can look at a provocation and see it for what it is, an invitation to lose themselves. When you decline that invitation, you don't just keep your calm, you gain authority over the moment, over the room, over yourself. This is where the first principle finds its meaning. Control your interpretation, or it will control you. Control the story, or the story will write you into a role you never chose. Control the direction of your thoughts, or they will drag you into places you never meant to go. And if you've ever felt the sting of losing your calm to someone who didn't deserve even a piece of your inner world, you already know how heavy that regret feels. But the beauty of Stoicism is that it never asks you to be perfect, only aware, only present, only willing to pause long enough to remember that not everything deserves a reaction, and almost nothing deserves a reaction that costs your peace. So as we step deeper into this journey together, hold on to this first truth. The world will always offer you moments that test your center, but the judgment you attach to those moments, that is yours alone. And in that small but sacred space, your calm is won or lost. Let this be the ground you defend as we move forward into what comes next. As we step into the second chapter, picture the moment right after a disturbance fades, when the echo of someone else's anger still hangs in the air and your heartbeat hasn't yet settled. That thin space, that trembling pause, is where the next truth reveals itself. Because if the first chapter showed us how the mind shapes the world, this one shows us how anger tries to hijack that mind and drag it somewhere you never meant to go. And it happens fast, faster than thought, faster than breath. One spark, one tone, one disrespect. Suddenly calm feels miles away. Now imagine you're walking through a crowded street, minding your own pace, when someone bumps your shoulder hard enough to jolt you backward. They don't look. They don't apologize. They don't care. In that instant, what rises first? The pain, the surprise, or the anger that says you must react or be diminished? Most people feel that flare as if it were a command. But it's not a command. It's a test, a mirror, a reminder that anger is never about the world crashing into you. It is about what you do with the impact. Seneca once wrote that anger is a brief madness, not poetic madness, not dramatic madness, a literal loss of the rational mind, the very thing the Stoics protect above everything else. And if you look closely, you'll notice that anger doesn't strengthen you. It narrows you. Your vision tightens. Your breath shortens. Your judgment collapses from a wide horizon into a single burning point. Suddenly you stop seeing the full picture and you see only the offense, only the wound, only the need to respond. That is the trap. Let me share a moment that taught me this. A man I once worked with had a habit of making cutting comments disguised as jokes, harmless enough to slip under the radar, sharp enough to draw blood. For a while, I reacted, not loudly, but internally. I carried his words longer than I should have. I replayed them. I let them shape the way I entered a room. And one day, after one of those remarks landed exactly where he wanted it to, I felt a wave of anger that seemed justified, righteous even. But as I opened my mouth, something in me paused. A small but steady voice said, "If you react now, you are his creation, not your own." So I closed my mouth. I breathed. And I watched him, not with fury, with clarity. He waited for heat. I gave him silence. His smirk faded. Anger expects fuel. Without fuel, it dies. That day, mine died instead of burning me alive. And I realized something I had never seen so clearly before. Most provocations are invitations, not obligations. You can decline. Epictetus reminded his students that no person has the power to make you angry unless you surrender your reason. He didn't mean suppress emotion. He meant see emotion for what it is. A messenger, a signal, a flare shot into the sky to warn you that something inside needs attention, not a force that must carry you away. Picture anger as a wild horse pulling at the reins. Most people climb on its back without thinking. They let it run. They smash through doors. They break things. They say words that cannot be unsaid. But the Stoic does something different. The Stoic steps back, observes, asks, "Where is this horse trying to take me? And is that somewhere I want to go?" This pause, this narrow doorway between impulse and action, is where strength is built. Think of a heated conversation where someone raises their voice at you, waiting for you to meet them at their level. When you match their tone, you lose yourself. When you stay grounded, you lose nothing. I once watched a friend handle a situation like this with astonishing grace. Someone accused him unfairly in front of others, their voice loud, sharp, dripping with emotion. The room stiffened. Everyone braced for a clash. But he didn't rise. He didn't defend. He simply said quietly, "I'll respond when you're ready to speak calmly." And then he stepped back. The effect was immediate. The accuser stumbled, caught in the weight of their own performance. The room shifted toward my friend, not because he won, but because he didn't give anger a stage to perform on. This is the hidden power of emotional self-command. People think calmness is passive, but calmness is force, a force that bends the room, a force that separates the wise from the reckless, a force that leaves those who rely on chaos standing in their own shadows. And here is where the lesson deepens. Anger wants to convince you that it is strength, that to explode is to assert power. But the Stoics knew the opposite. They taught that power without restraint is fragility disguised as force. True strength is choosing not to ignite when the world hands you a flame. True strength is walking away when your pride wants a fight. True strength is keeping your inner world intact while someone else tries to shatter it. This doesn't mean becoming cold. It means becoming deliberate. It means deciding rather than reacting. It means mastering the one thing that can never be taken from you, the sovereignty of your response. At this stage, let yourself imagine what your life would look like if anger never dictated your actions again. How many arguments would dissolve before they began? How many regrets would never be born? How many relationships would no longer feel like battlegrounds but conversations? Your calm would not make you smaller. It would make you untouchable. And that brings us to the heart of this chapter. Anger is not your enemy. It is your teacher. It reveals where you are open, where you are soft, where you still bleed. And if you let it teach you rather than rule you, it can guide you toward the inner fortitude that no insult, no disrespect, no chaos can touch. So let this chapter rest in you with one truth carved deep beneath the surface. You do not rise by matching another person's fire. You rise by refusing to burn, and from here the path only gets clearer as we move toward the next principle waiting ahead. As we step into the third chapter, imagine the air after anger has passed, the way a room feels when a storm has moved on, but the tension still clings to the walls. That subtle heaviness lingers, not because something terrible happened, but because something inside you was shaken. And it's in that lingering quiet that another truth begins to rise. Calmness is strength in its quietest form. The kind that stands on its own, steady as stone, unaffected by noise. The kind that grows in the center of your chest when the world expects you to fall apart and you don't. Now imagine you're sitting at a table surrounded by people who think volume equals authority. You watch as one person grows louder, more reactive, certain that force will win the moment. Their words rush like a wave, crashing without direction, hoping noise will disguise insecurity. And right beside them, you see someone else. They barely speak, they listen, they hold a calm that doesn't bend. And slowly, almost invisibly, the room begins to turn toward them. Why? Because calmness reveals who is truly in control. Marcus Aurelius once wrote that the best revenge is not to become like the wrongdoer. He didn't mean revenge in the dramatic sense. He meant power, inner power. The kind that refuses to mirror chaos. The kind that refuses to dance to someone else's emotional rhythm. Calmness is resistance. Calmness is defiance. Calmness is command. Here's where the lesson sharpens. Society tells you that strength looks loud, that dominance is expressed through raised voices, sharp tongues, fierce gestures. But the Stoics saw through that illusion long before we were ever born. They understood that anyone can explode, anyone can react, anyone can lose themselves for a moment of heat, but very few can stay grounded when provoked. Very few can see an insult and let it dissolve. Very few can stand in the center of conflict and refuse to be dragged into the fire. There's a story I carry with me, one I witnessed years ago that still colors the way I understand strength. I watched a disagreement unfold between two people, one fueled by frustration, the other anchored in calm. The frustrated one swung words like weapons, using accusation after accusation, grasping for any opening to provoke a reaction. You could see the desperation behind the anger. It's easy to miss that desperation if you only look at the surface. But it was there, clear as day. The calm one, though, didn't flinch. They didn't shrink. They didn't fight. They stood upright, breathing slowly, choosing silence before speaking. And when they finally answered, their voice was steady enough to steady everyone else. You could see the shift in the room. The angry one started to drown in their own noise. The calm one didn't need to win. They already had. Strength does not always roar. Sometimes it is the quiet refusal to be moved. And here is where the truth deepens. Calmness isn't just a way to avoid conflict. It's a way to expose it. When someone attacks you expecting rage and you offer steadiness instead, you reveal their imbalance, their lack of grounding, their lack of command over themselves. And nothing unsettles a troubled person more than someone who won't join them in their turmoil. Calmness is a mirror. A brutal one. It shows others their own chaos, and they feel it. Seneca warned us that the one who loses their temper loses themselves. But the one who keeps their calm owns themselves entirely. When you begin to see calmness not as passivity but as power, everything changes. You stop proving. You stop defending. You stop explaining your worth to people who have no intention of understanding it. You stop stepping into battles designed to drain you. You stop letting emotions pull you in directions that betray who you want to become. This is where your strength matures. Not in your ability to fight, but in your ability to choose when, not if, you should. Calmness gives you choice. Anger steals it. Calmness opens your field of vision. Rage narrows it until you see nothing but the thing you hate. Calmness lets you stand on the shore and see the whole sea. Anger forces you underwater until all you taste is salt. Let me give you another moment to hold on to. A friend once told me about a confrontation he witnessed in a crowded cafe. Two people collided, one spilling coffee onto the other. The man who got splashed erupted immediately, shouting, blaming, puffing himself up as if the entire room belonged to him. The other person, covered in the coffee, simply took a breath and said, "It's fine. I'll clean it." The entire cafe fell silent. The angry man suddenly looked small, smaller than the spill, smaller than the moment, smaller than the calm that humbled him. That's when it hit me. Calmness intimidates the unsteady more than anger ever will. Anger is predictable. Calmness is power. The Stoics knew this. They trained for it. They practiced it daily, not because they wanted to appear detached, but because they wanted to be free. Free from the pull of ego, free from the traps of impulse, free from being dragged into emotional arenas where nothing is ever truly won. And as this chapter settles, let this truth settle with it. Calmness is not the absence of strength. It is the highest form of it. Because when you remain calm, you choose yourself. You choose clarity. You choose dignity. And that choice becomes a shield no one can break. From here, the path leads us deeper into the next principle, where calmness meets discipline and the inner fortress grows stronger still. As we step into the fourth chapter, imagine the feeling that comes right after a disappointment you didn't see coming, a moment when life shifts beneath your feet without warning. The kind of shift that makes you stop and ask yourself why things turned out the way they did. Why effort didn't match reward, why your sincerity wasn't returned. It's that quiet sting, that heaviness in the chest, the soft whisper that says, "This wasn't supposed to happen." And yet it did. Life has a way of ignoring our expectations, of bending in directions we never asked for. But this chapter isn't about the unfairness itself. It's about what you become when you face it. Now imagine you're holding something fragile, trusting it with both hands, pouring time and heart into it. Maybe it's a dream, maybe it's a relationship, maybe it's a chance you believed would open a new path for you. And then, without reason or warning, it breaks. Not because you were careless, not because you were unworthy. Simply because life is life, unpredictable, indifferent, wild. In that moment, what rises in you first? The pain, the disappointment, or the quiet voice that asks, "Why me?" We've all heard that question. Some of us have lived inside it. But the Stoics gave us a different one. They asked, "Why not me?" Not from a place of defeat, but from a place of strength. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the universe is change and our life is what our thoughts make it. He never said the universe is fair. He said it is what it is. And the man who accepts this truth is free long before the one who resists it, because the one who resists expects fairness. The one who accepts prepares for life as it comes. Here's where the lesson deepens. Life will not reward you simply because you're good. It will not protect you simply because you try. It will not soften itself simply because you walk gently. And if you wait for everything to be balanced before you move, you will spend your whole life standing still. Unfairness is not the exception, it is the landscape. And once you understand that, unfairness loses its power to shock you. I remember a man I once knew who worked harder than everyone around him. He stayed late, gave more than required, carried tasks no one else wanted. But when the time came for advancement, the position went to someone with connections, not competence. I watched the disappointment hit him like a blow. For days he walked around as if the world had singled him out. He kept saying, "This isn't fair." But the truth was simpler. It wasn't personal. It wasn't targeted. It wasn't fate punishing him. It was life behaving exactly as life always behaves, without guarantee. Months later, I asked him what changed. He told me something I never forgot. "I stopped expecting fairness," he said. "Before that, every setback felt like betrayal. Now it just feels like the next step." That was the moment he became stronger, not when the unfairness stopped, but when his attachment to fairness died. And in that death, he found freedom. Epictetus taught that we should meet everything with the posture of acceptance, not because we lack ambition, but because we refuse to argue with reality. A sailor does not scream at the sea for creating waves. He adjusts his sail. A warrior does not curse the battlefield for being dangerous. He steps forward anyway. The Stoic does not demand that life be smooth. He demands that he himself be steady. At this stage, let yourself see how much of your suffering came not from what happened, but from your belief that it shouldn't have happened. That belief is a chain. And the moment you drop it, the world stops feeling like an enemy. Unfairness becomes expected, and because it's expected, it loses its fangs. Let me share another story. A woman I knew poured years into building something she believed would shape her future. She invested everything: time, money, hope. But the project fell apart due to decisions far beyond her control. People failed her. Promises were broken. Circumstances shifted. When it collapsed, she felt crushed. But after the grief settled, she picked herself up and said something that sounded almost like Stoic wisdom reborn. Life never promised me stability. I promised myself resilience. And she kept going, not because the world became softer, but because she became stronger. This is where growth happens. Not in the moments when the world treats you kindly, but in the moments when it doesn't. Strength built on fairness is fragile. Strength built on reality is unbreakable. Seneca said that the wise man adapts himself to the world, not the world to him, because the world is not shaped by our likes and dislikes. It moves by its own laws, and the one who sees this clearly walks through chaos without losing himself. When you stop expecting fairness, you stop being wounded by its absence. When you stop demanding justice from every event, you stop feeling attacked by every difficulty. When you accept that life bends unpredictably, you stop breaking every time it does. Here's the truth carved in stone. You cannot control how life unfolds, but you can control how you stand inside it. And if you can stand inside it without bitterness, without the belief that you've been targeted, without waiting for the world to correct itself before you continue, then you've mastered something rare. So let this chapter rest in you like a steady flame. Life will not always be fair. People will not always be just. Circumstances will not always align. But your response, your inner posture, your resilience, your calm, these remain yours. protected, untouched, untouchable. From here, we move toward the next truth, where preparation meets acceptance, and the mind learns to expect difficulty before it arrives. As we step into the 5th chapter, imagine the quiet seconds before a blow lands, not on your body, but on your peace. Those seconds when you sense something approaching, a comment, a setback, a mistake, a sudden shift in someone's tone. You feel it tightening in the air, the same way a storm warns you with pressure before rain begins. And this time, unlike before, you're not surprised. You've seen this pattern. You've lived it. You've learned that life does not always deliver trouble with an invitation. It kicks the door open. And that is exactly why the Stoics taught one of the most overlooked forms of strength, expecting difficulty before it arrives. Now imagine walking into a day you hope will be smooth, only to have someone cut you off on the road, or speak to you with impatience, or bring you a problem you didn't create. When you expect perfection, every disruption feels like an attack. But when you expect imperfection, every disruption feels like part of the landscape. You don't take it personally, you don't tighten, you don't flare. You acknowledge it the way a seasoned traveler acknowledges rocky terrain, present, yes, but not surprising, not enough to break your stride. Here's where the Stoics open another door. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself each morning that he would meet people who were selfish, ungrateful, arrogant, deceitful, jealous, and rude. He wasn't being cynical, he was preparing his mind. Because a mind unprepared is a mind that suffers. But a mind that sees life clearly cannot be shaken easily. Preparation is resilience in disguise. I remember someone I knew who used to assume every day would go smoothly. He believed that calmness came from things working out. And so, when anything went wrong, a delayed meeting, a rude stranger, a sudden change, he reacted sharply. Not because the moment was unbearable, but because he expected it to be absent. His expectation was the problem, not the event. One day, after yet another frustrated morning, he told me he felt like the world had something against him. I asked him gently, "Has life ever promised you ease?" He went quiet. That question followed him for weeks. Months later, he came back changed. He told me he had begun each day with one small Stoic reminder. Trouble will show up. Let me meet it calmly. And the transformation was startling. Nothing around him changed, but everything within him did. He no longer reacted like a man being ambushed. He walked like someone who already knew the ground he was stepping on. His peace remained intact, not because the world improved, but because his expectation did. This is the power of anticipating difficulty, not with fear, not with pessimism, but with clarity. At this stage of the journey, ask yourself this: how many times were you hurt, not because something was hard, but because you thought it wasn't supposed to be hard? How many times did you lose your calm, not because someone insulted you, but because you expected them to be wiser than they are? How many times did you feel defeated, not because life was unfair, but because you expected fairness to arrive on time? Expectation is a fragile shield. Preparation is a steel one. Seneca taught that misfortune hits hardest when it is unexpected, and he wasn't glorifying suffering. He was reminding us that shock is often worse than pain. Anticipation softens the blow. Awareness spreads the impact. Preparation keeps the heart steady even when the moment shakes. Here's where this truth becomes practical. When you expect people to be perfect, you will drown in disappointment. When you expect them to be human, you will move through the world with understanding instead of outrage. When you expect plans to unfold flawlessly, you will crumble at the smallest disruption. But when you expect obstacles, each one becomes merely part of the path, not an interruption, not a threat, just a step. Let me share another moment that holds this lesson deep. A woman I once knew traveled often for her work. Flights, delays, lines, unpredictable schedules, it all weighed on her. She confessed that airports exhausted her soul. "It's the waiting," she said. "It's the uncertainty. It's the chaos." But I watched her one day after she had adopted a stoic approach. She arrived early, sat down calmly, and before anything happened, she whispered to herself, "Today will test me, and I will not break." When the inevitable delays came, she didn't frown. When a passenger complained loudly nearby, she didn't stiffen. She simply stayed steady, because she had expected the storm, and the storm lost its teeth. Strength doesn't always look like pushing through. Sometimes it looks like being unsurprised. The Stoics practiced imagining challenges not to suffer twice, but to suffer less. They trained their minds the way a warrior trains for battle, not with fear, but with readiness. A ready mind loses far less peace. And now the question becomes, how do you walk through your life? Do you hope for ease and collapse at disruption? Or do you prepare for disruption and move through it with ease? From here, as this chapter settles into your bones, let one truth carve itself clearly. Peace is not found in a quiet world. Peace is found in a prepared mind. And the moment you learn to expect difficulty, difficulty stops owning you. Because in the chapters ahead, we will step deeper into this power. The art of staying unshaken, not by avoiding storms, but by learning to walk through them with your center unbroken. Entering the 6th chapter, imagine a door inside you that's been left slightly open for years. A door anyone could push with a careless word or a single shift in tone. You know that door, everyone has one. The place where your emotions sit too close to the surface. Where your peace is vulnerable, where a stranger's comment, or a friend's silence, or a loved one's hesitation can slip through and disturb everything. And this is where the next principle rises. If you want to remain calm around anyone or anything, your inner world cannot be easily reached. Not by accident, not by noise, not by people who do not carry your best interest. Now imagine someone walking past you, tossing a quick remark, not meant to wound, but sharp enough to scratch. If your inner world sits exposed, you feel it instantly. A sting, a tightening, a reaction forming before you can stop it. But if your inner world sits deep, protected, grounded, guarded, not even the sharpest remark reaches you. It dissolves before impact. It falls flat. It loses its aim. That is the power the Stoics tried to teach, the strength of the well-fortified mind. Marcus Aurelius once reminded himself, the world outside touches only the surface. The mind alone decides how deep it goes. He wasn't writing poetry, he was writing survival instructions. Because a mind without walls becomes a battlefield for every passing event. A mind with strong walls becomes a sanctuary. Here's where this lesson sharpens. People often assume protecting their inner world means shutting others out. But that's not what the Stoics taught. They taught discernment. They taught depth. They taught the difference between being open-hearted and being easily accessed. You can be kind without being penetrable. You can be warm without being exposed. You can be generous without letting everyone inside the part of you that must stay steady. Let me tell you a story that shaped this truth for me. There was a man I knew who carried his emotions like lanterns, visible, bright, impossible to miss. If he was happy, everyone knew. If he was hurt, everyone felt it. If he was disappointed, the whole room changed. At first, people admired his honesty. They called him expressive, open, real. But slowly, he learned a harder truth. Those who meant well embraced his light. Those who didn't used it. They learned how to affect him. They learned what tone deflated him, what silence unsettled him, what comment pierced deeply. And eventually, life became exhausting for him, not because people were cruel, but because he had placed his inner world in their hands. One day, after a particularly rough experience, he said something unforgettable. "I gave people the blueprint to destroy me." That was the day he began to rebuild. Not walls of coldness, but walls of clarity. He stopped telling everyone what bothered him. He stopped allowing every emotion to show on his face. He learned to sit with discomfort before expressing it. He learned that silence can be strength. And slowly, something remarkable happened. He became calmer, less reactive, harder to shake. People treated him differently, not because he was distant, but because he no longer handed them access to the places that hurt. At this stage, imagine yourself as a house. Some rooms are open to all, some to a few, some to only one or two. But there must be at least one room, one quiet, sacred place, where only you can enter. No one's words reach it. No one's behavior shifts it. No one's approval or disapproval decides its worth. That room is your inner world, and the Stoics insisted it must be guarded. Epictetus said that no one can disturb your mind unless you grant them access. He meant it literally. You choose who enters. You choose who influences. You choose who gets close enough to touch the parts of you that are still healing. But most people give this access away freely, carelessly, unconsciously. A raised voice enters. A rude tone enters. A disappointment enters. Not because it earned entry, but because no boundary existed to stop it. This is why strengthening your inner world is not an act of isolation. It is an act of preservation. It is how calm is kept, how self-respect grows, how dignity stays intact. Let me give you another moment to hold on to. A woman I knew once struggled deeply with others' opinions. If someone liked her, she felt lifted. If someone didn't, she felt crushed. Her emotional weather changed based on the smallest shift around her. One day, she told me she wanted to feel steady, untouched by every passing breeze. And she started with one small practice. She stopped explaining herself. She stopped justifying her choices. She stopped looking outward for permission to feel okay. She became her own anchor, and the transformation was unmistakable. She didn't become colder. She became stronger. The winds around her didn't stop. She simply stopped letting them inside. Strengthening your inner world is an act of deep courage because it requires saying, "My peace is mine. My emotions are mine. My center belongs to me alone." It requires accepting that not everything deserves a reaction. Not everyone deserves access. Not every moment deserves entry into the space where your calm lives. And when you build this inner space, steady, grounded, deep, the world loses its grip on you. People lose their ability to unsettle you. Events lose their ability to shake you. Your calm stops being something the world can take. It becomes something you carry. As this chapter settles, let one truth settle with it. When your inner world becomes harder to access, your outer world becomes easier to navigate. And from here, we move toward the next principle, where control shifts from guarding your mind to mastering your breath. The quiet force that anchors everything else. As we step into the 7th chapter, imagine that brief moment when your emotions surge before you can name them, like a wave rising out of a calm sea, sudden and uninvited. It happens in arguments, in disappointments, in unexpected stress. Your chest tightens, your pulse quickens, the world narrows, and in that narrowness, you often make decisions you later regret. This is where the next Stoic principle enters: soft, simple, easily dismissed, but capable of reshaping your entire inner landscape: the breath. Now, imagine you're standing at the edge of a cliff, not the kind carved by nature, but the kind carved inside your own mind, the cliff between reaction and restraint. Most people leap without thinking. They fall into anger, into panic, into defensiveness. But the Stoics learned that there is a single rope spanning that inner cliff, a lifeline, a stabilizer, something always within reach but rarely used: your breath. The quiet companion you forget until something shakes you. The tool you ignore until life presses you hard enough. Marcus Aurelius wrote that if you return to yourself, you return to your breath. And if you return to your breath, you return to your strength. He saw the breath not as a biological function, but as a gate, a pause, a reclaiming of control when everything around you seems designed to pull it away. And that is why this chapter matters, because without the breath, the mind becomes a wild horse running in all directions. With the breath, the reins return to your hands. I remember a man I once worked with who carried stress like a shadow. It followed him everywhere. You could see it in the tightness of his jaw, in the way he answered too quickly, in the way his eyes darted around a room as if something was always about to strike. His reactions were sharp, not because he was cruel, but because he was uncentered. Life touched him too easily. One day, during a tense meeting, someone challenged him publicly. The room froze. You could feel the tension heating up like metal in fire. Everyone expected him to snap. He almost did. But then, just before speaking, he inhaled. A slow, deep breath. 1 second, 2, 3, and something in him shifted. His shoulders dropped, his eyes steadied. He answered calmly, and that calmness changed the entire direction of the conversation. Afterward, he told me, if I hadn't breathed, I would have burned the room down. The breath saved him from himself. At this stage of your life, ask yourself, how many disasters were born from the first reaction, not the real situation? How many arguments escalated because you couldn't slow your own pulse? How many decisions were made in the heat of panic instead of the clarity of pause? The Stoics knew that the body reacts before the mind does. But if you control the breath, you slow the body. When the body slows, the mind awakens. And when the mind awakens, you become unshakable. Epictetus taught that the first step toward mastery is recognizing the first impulse. The breath is how you interrupt it. You do not suppress emotion, you delay its control. You do not deny anger, you dissolve its urgency. You do not pretend there is no fear, you prevent fear from taking the throne. Think of the breath as a gatekeeper. If you breathe before responding, you force the world to wait. You create space between the event and your judgment, between the words and your meaning, between the moment and your identity. That space is everything. That space is power. Let me give you another moment to hold. A woman I knew struggled deeply with anxiety, not the dramatic kind, but the quiet, invisible kind that sits in the stomach like a stone. When things went wrong, she spiraled. When someone spoke harshly to her, she folded. One day, an older man she admired, someone who had lived long enough to see patterns in people, said to her, "When the world speeds up, you slow down. She asked him how. He answered, by breathing deeper than the situation demands. She took that to heart, and slowly, year by year, her life shifted. She began breathing through misunderstandings, through mistakes, through fears that used to break her. People around her said she had changed, but she hadn't changed. She had returned to herself. Sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is inhale. This is where the principle rises to its fullest form. The breath is not meant to calm you, it is meant to anchor you. Calmness is a side effect. The real purpose is control. When you breathe before reacting, you prove to yourself that the moment does not own you. You prove that your emotions do not command you. You prove that your peace is not governed by what happens outside, but by what you do inside. This is inner leadership, inner sovereignty, inner discipline. And when you develop this habit, you begin to notice something unexpected. People change around you. Their tone softens. Their urgency fades. Their aggression feels misplaced. They begin adjusting to your pace instead of pulling you into theirs, because stillness has gravity, calmness has weight, and a centered person pulls others into stability without ever raising a voice. As this chapter comes to its quiet close, let one truth settle into your bones like a deep exhale. The breath is the bridge between who you are in your instincts and who you are in your intentions. Without it, life shakes you. With it, life must move around you. From here, we continue forward into the next principle, where we learn to recognize triggers before they rise and reclaim the mind long before chaos ever reaches it. As we step into the 8th chapter, imagine a moment so small most people never notice it, the brief flicker in your chest, just before an emotion rises, the way the air changes right before your mind colors an event as threat, offense, or disappointment. It is subtle, almost invisible, like the faint tremor in the ground before an earthquake. And yet, this is where the next Stoic principle lives. Not in the reaction, not in the emotion, but in the tiny spark that comes before both. The spark most people overlook. The spark you must learn to see. Now imagine walking through your day as you normally do, calm, steady, mind on your tasks, when suddenly someone says something that hits a vulnerable place you didn't know was exposed. You feel a tightening behind your ribs, the slightest shift in your breathing, the subtle clench in your jaw. Most people rush past this moment, reacting before they even realize a trigger has been pulled. But what if, instead of reacting, you paused at the very first signal? What if you could see the emotion before it rose, the story before it formed, the reaction before it controlled you? This is where Stoic mastery begins, not at the end of the reaction, not even in the middle, but at the very beginning. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the mind has the power to stand apart from its own impulses, to witness them like a silent guardian. He meant that you can step outside yourself for a split second and watch your reaction forming before it becomes you. That split second is freedom. That split second is strength. I once knew a man who struggled deeply with sudden anger, not the loud kind, the quiet kind, the kind that simmered beneath his skin and erupted at the smallest provocation. Whenever something triggered him, he felt as though the moment owned him completely. But one day, during a conversation that began to turn tense, he noticed something strange. Before his anger rose, he felt a warm flush in his neck, just a sensation, something he had never paid attention to. Instead of reacting, he focused on that sensation, watched it, listened to it, and something remarkable happened. He realized the anger was an echo, not a command, a flare, not a force. For the first time, he did not speak from emotion, he spoke from awareness, and his entire life began to change because of that one moment. At this stage, think of your emotions as waves. Most people try to stop them once they've already crashed, but the Stoic watches the water far before it reaches the shore. He notices the wind, the ripple, the shift, before the wave becomes a wave. Epictetus taught that the first movement of the mind is not under our control, but everything after that is. The first movement is the trigger, the sudden sting, the pulse of fear, the rise of irritation. You cannot stop that from appearing, but what you do next defines your entire inner life. Will you become the feeling, or will you observe it? Here's where the practice deepens. When you learn to identify your triggers early, you gain the ability to intercept them. Imagine catching an arrow in your hand before it ever reaches your chest. Imagine stopping a fire while it's still a single spark instead of an inferno. That's what recognizing your triggers does. It saves you from battles you don't need to fight. Let me share another story. A woman I knew was easily overwhelmed whenever someone questioned her. Not because she lacked confidence, but because growing up, questions came with blame. For years, she reacted defensively without understanding why. One day, after learning about the Stoics, she decided to pay closer attention to the very first physical sign of tension. She discovered it wasn't the words that triggered her. It was the tone, the slight shift upward, the pressure in the question. Once she identified that, everything changed. She could feel the rise inside her long before it took her voice. She learned to breathe, to pause, to respond instead of react. And with time, she no longer lived at the mercy of other people's tone. Awareness is liberation. When you see your triggers early, you stop being surprised by your own emotions. You stop being controlled by situations you've lived through before. You stop repeating patterns you're tired of carrying. You recognize the beginning before the chaos reaches its peak. Seneca taught that no wind is favorable to the sailor who doesn't know where he is steering. In your inner life, the wind is your emotions. If you do not see where they begin, you will always feel lost inside them. But if you identify the earlier signs, you regain your direction. And here is the deeper truth. Triggers are teachers. They show you where you still carry unfinished battles. They reveal wounds that want healing. They point to memories you've buried too quickly. They highlight spaces inside you where strength is still forming. When you learn to see them without fear, they stop being threats. They become mirrors. This is where Stoic power shines brightest. The calm person is not the one who feels nothing, but the one who sees everything as it arises. The one who notices the tremor before the emotion. The one who observes the impulse before the action. The one who meets the moment before it becomes a storm. And when you master this skill, the world no longer overwhelms you. People no longer push you into reactions you don't want to have. Life no longer surprises you with sudden fire. Your emotions become signals, not chains. Triggers become information, not attacks. You move through your life with clarity, with steadiness, with authority. As this chapter settles, let one truth rise to the surface. Control does not begin with emotion. It begins with awareness. If you can see the spark early, you will never be burned by the flame. From here, we move into the next chapter, where the mind learns not only to intercept triggers, but to wield silence as a shield that turns even the harshest moments into opportunities for mastery. As we step into the 9th chapter, imagine a moment when the world around you suddenly becomes louder than it should be, voices clashing, tempers rising, emotions spilling into the air like heat from a flame. In that noise, your first instinct might be to push back, to match fire with fire, to defend yourself with words sharper than theirs. But something in you hesitates, sensing that the louder the world becomes, the quieter you must be. This is where the next Stoic principle unfolds. The power of silence, not as withdrawal, but as dominance. Not as avoidance, but as mastery. Now imagine standing in a crowded hallway where someone throws an accusation your way, expecting you to bite. You feel the tension gathering in your throat, the old urge to argue, to correct, to justify, to reclaim your dignity through words. But instead of speaking, you pause. You let the moment breathe. You feel your presence deepen rather than shrink. And suddenly, the person who tried to provoke you begins to feel the weight of their own words echoing back at them. That's the strange truth about silence. It reveals what noise tries to hide. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the best answer to an insult is to not imitate the one who delivered it. He wasn't telling you to stay quiet out of fear. He was telling you that silence is a strategy. That silence turns the mirror back onto the other person. That silence forces them to face themselves without the distraction of your reaction. And what many never realize is this: people fear silence far more than confrontation. I once knew a man who had mastered this art in a way that left a permanent imprint on me. During a heated discussion at work, someone spoke to him with an arrogance so sharp the entire room went tense. You could feel the crowd waiting for his reaction, hungry for a clash. But he didn't react. He simply looked at the person, calm, centered, unbothered, not passive, present. The silence stretched until the other man grew visibly uncomfortable, his confidence dissolving under the weight of what he thought would be a battle. And when my friend finally spoke, he said only, "Are you finished?" It wasn't sarcasm. It wasn't mockery. It was clarity. It was calmness used as a blade, and it cut deeper than anger ever could. At this stage, think of silence as a kind of armor. Not the kind that hides you, but the kind that shields you without needing to strike. When you answer every attack, you reveal your weak points. When you react to every comment, you show where you can be reached. But when you hold silence, you become unreadable, unpredictable, untouchable. People lose their footing when they cannot provoke you. Their certainty collapses. Their narrative unravels. Seneca taught that a person who cannot govern their tongue will never govern their life. And this applies not only to what you say, but to what you choose not to say. Silence is discipline. Silence is restraint. Silence is choosing to let the storm stay outside your walls, not letting it seep into the foundation of who you are. Imagine now a woman I once knew, someone who grew up believing she had to defend herself constantly. Every misunderstanding, every criticism, every look. It exhausted her. She lived in a perpetual state of verbal battle, drained by conflicts she didn't need to enter. But as she grew older, she discovered something transformative. The more she explained herself, the less people listened. The more she defended herself, the less people respected her. One day, during an argument with a co-worker, she stopped mid-sentence, took a breath, and said nothing more. The silence stretched. The co-worker fumbled, frustrated that she wasn't feeding the fire. And in that moment, she realized something profound. She didn't owe a performance to anyone. Her silence spoke for her. Her calmness became her authority. This is the power quiet people often never realize they hold. Noise is reactive. Silence is decisive. Noise tries to win. Silence has already won. When someone attacks you with words, they expect engagement. They want to pull you into their energy. They want you to validate their chaos by joining it. But when you refuse that invitation, you become something rare, a person who cannot be controlled, a person who cannot be manipulated through emotion, a person who cannot be moved simply because someone else is shaking. At its deepest level, silence is self-respect. It says, "My peace is worth more than this argument. My dignity is worth more than this moment. My time is worth more than this chaos." And when you live from that place, you rise above pettiness without ever lifting a finger. Epictetus reminded his students that if you want to defeat someone, don't fight them. Think better than they do. Silence is the space where better thinking lives. It is the doorway to clarity. It is where you regain the high ground. And now, as the chapter softens into its final breath, let one truth settle deeply. Silence is not the absence of power. It is the presence of it. It is the strength to let the world reveal itself while you remain unmoved. It is the discipline to protect your energy even when others try to provoke it. It is the calm that breaks the cycle of conflict before it ever begins. From here, we move toward the next principle, where the Stoic path teaches not only how to stay calm in silence, but how to transform silence into a foundation for deeper control over your inner life. As we step into the 10th chapter, imagine a moment when life refuses to move the way you want it to. You push, it resists. You plan, it bends sideways. You try to control the outcome, and the outcome slips through your fingers like water. That sting of frustration, that tight pull in the chest, that feeling of reaching for something that keeps shifting. This is where the next Stoic principle quietly emerges. To let go of your attachment to outcomes, even while giving everything you have to the moment in front of you. Now, imagine you've poured yourself into something, a conversation, a project, a dream, believing that effort guarantees reward. You stayed late. You cared deeply. You planned carefully. And still, the result is not the one you expected. Maybe someone misunderstood you. Maybe the path changed. Maybe circumstances bent against you in a way you couldn't foresee. Most people interpret this as failure, but the Stoics saw it differently. They saw it as a reminder that you control action, not destiny. You shape intention, not result. You command effort, not reward. Marcus Aurelius wrote that when you release your grip on outcomes, you free yourself from the turbulence of fortune. And he wasn't telling you to be indifferent or passive. He was telling you to anchor yourself in what is yours alone, your choices, your integrity, your character. Everything else is wind. I once knew a young man who chased a long-awaited promotion. He worked harder than everyone around him, believing effort alone would bring him what he wanted. He sacrificed sleep, weekends, time with the people he loved. And in the end, the promotion went to someone else. Not because the other person was better, but because the decision was influenced by factors he never had the power to control. I watched the disappointment crush him. He took it as a statement about his worth. He kept saying, "I did everything right. Why didn't it happen?" Weeks passed before he understood the truth. He had attached his peace to something he could not command, and when that thing slipped, it dragged his peace with it. Months later, he told me something I've never forgotten. "I will give my best again, but I will never hand my inner world to an outcome again." When he said that, he sounded exactly like a student of the ancient Stoics, detached from fortune, rooted in effort, freed from the illusion of control. At this stage, ask yourself, how many times did you suffer not because the outcome was bad, but because you believed you were entitled to a specific one? How many times did your calm shatter not because life went wrong, but because you insisted it go right? Seneca reminded us that the greatest cause of unhappiness is the expectation that events must follow our preferences. The Stoics understood that attachment is a trap, the kind that tightens when the world moves in its own direction. But when you loosen your grip, when you work without clinging, when you give fully without demanding, something subtle and powerful happens. Disappointment loses its edge. Loss loses its dominance. Life loses its ability to control you. Let me share another story. A woman I knew once fell deeply in love with an idea of how her life should unfold. She planned meticulously. She imagined the milestones, the successes, the smoothness of the path ahead. But life didn't follow her script. Unexpected events tore apart what she had built. At first, she fought the collapse with everything she had, believing resistance could force fate back into alignment. But the more she fought, the more she broke. One evening, after months of struggle, she sat quietly and said to herself, "Maybe the path is not mine to dictate, only the steps." And in that moment, she released something heavy. She stopped trying to force life. She began to work with what she had, not what she demanded. And slowly, her peace returned, her strength returned, her clarity returned. This is the paradox of detachment. When you release the outcome, you gain control. When you stop clinging, you begin living. When you detach from results, you reclaim the present moment, because that is the only place you ever had influence. Epictetus taught that freedom comes from focusing on what belongs to you and letting go of what doesn't. The outcome never belonged to you. The effort always did. This principle is not about giving up. It is about showing up without losing yourself in what may follow. It is about living fully while accepting that life moves by its own laws. It is about doing the right thing because it is right, not because it guarantees the result you crave. And here is the deepest truth of this chapter. Attachment makes you fragile. Detachment makes you invincible. When your peace depends on a single outcome, you give the world the power to break you. But when you ground your peace in your own actions, nothing can touch you, not failure, not rejection, not the unexpected curve of fate. As this chapter settles into silence, let one final truth carve itself into your mind. Do everything with your whole heart, but give your heart only to the doing, never to the outcome. Because when you detach from the result, you walk through life with a calm no chaos can bend. From here, we step into the next principle, where the Stoic path leads us deeper into discernment, teaching us how to separate what is yours from what never was, and freeing your inner world even more. As we step into the 11th chapter, imagine standing at a crossroads inside your own mind, where one path is tangled with confusion and the other is clear with purpose. You feel the weight of a decision pressing against your chest, not because the world demands an answer, but because your thoughts have begun to drift into places that weaken you. And suddenly you realize something. Most of the turmoil you carry does not come from events or people or fate, but from the thoughts you entertain without questioning. This is where the next Stoic principle rises like a lamp in the dark. Guard your self-talk like a fortress, because the words you whisper to yourself shape the world more powerfully than any voice outside you. Now, imagine waking up on a day that should be ordinary, but before you even stand, a single thought slips in. A doubt, a fear, a memory, a judgment about yourself. And without noticing, your whole mood shifts, your energy lowers, your resilience thins. It wasn't the day that weakened you, it was the thought, the quiet one, the one you didn't catch. Most battles are lost long before they reach the surface. Most storms begin not in the skies, but in the mind. Marcus Aurelius warned himself daily to keep a close watch on his own thinking, because the mind becomes what it repeatedly tells itself. He understood what so many overlook. The enemy is rarely outside, it is the untrained narrative within, and if you do not guard that narrative, it will shape you without your consent. Let me tell you about a man I once knew who lived constantly in self-doubt. Nothing outwardly tragic had happened to him. He had a stable life, good people around him, opportunities within reach. But his inner world was loud with opinions that weren't his own. He carried old criticisms like stones in his pocket. He repeated messages he absorbed from people who were long gone. His self-talk had become hostile territory. Every time life challenged him, he crumbled, not because the challenge was too great, but because the voice inside him said he couldn't rise to it. One day, he finally saw the truth. "My thoughts don't speak the truth," he said. "They speak my fear." From that moment on, he began to speak to himself differently, slowly, gently, firmly. And as his inner world softened, his outer world expanded. At this stage, imagine yourself standing at the doorway of your mind with a torch in your hand. Thoughts approach like travelers. Some bring clarity, some bring chaos, some bring courage, some bring poison. The Stoics taught that your task is to decide who enters. Not every thought deserves a seat at your table. Not every emotion deserves a voice in your council. Not every memory deserves to be relived. Epictetus told his students, "Your judgments are what disturb you. Not life, not people, not events. Your judgments. The quiet conversations you have with yourself when no one is listening. The stories you repeat until they become beliefs. The beliefs you nurture until they become chains." Let me share another story. A woman I once knew had a habit of criticizing herself before anyone else could. She called it humility, but it wasn't humility, it was harm. Every time she made a mistake, she said, "Of course I failed." Every time something didn't go smoothly, she said, "This always happens to me." Her self-talk became prophecy. It shaped her posture, her decisions, her courage. One day, during a moment of deep exhaustion, she looked in the mirror and asked, "Why am I speaking to myself like an enemy?" That question broke something open. She realized she had spent years guarding herself from others, but never guarding herself from herself. That is the danger of an unguarded inner world. It can destroy you quietly, gently, invisibly, and yet, when you begin to guard your self-talk, something extraordinary happens. You start catching the lies before they grow roots. You start replacing cruelty with honesty. You start correcting thoughts that weaken you. You stop using language that diminishes you. You stop predicting your own failure. You stop carrying narratives that never belong to you. Slowly, your mind becomes a friend instead of a battlefield. Seneca wrote that nothing burdens the spirit more than the weight it places upon itself. He meant that your mind can wound you far deeper than any insult from another person, but it can also heal you far more completely than any praise. Because the voice inside you has more power than all the noise outside you. When you speak to yourself with strength, you walk differently. When you speak to yourself with clarity, you choose differently. When you speak to yourself with dignity, you rise differently. Your thoughts become your armor. your inner voice becomes your guide. Your self-talk becomes a quiet source of resilience that no one else can touch. And here is where the lesson sharpens. Guarding your self-talk doesn't mean forcing positive thoughts. It means choosing truthful thoughts, honest ones, grounded ones, thoughts that align with your values, not your fears, thoughts that strengthen your character, not your wounds, thoughts that pull you inward rather than scatter you outward. This is the true Stoic discipline, curating the mind the way a gardener curates a sacred field, removing weeds, nurturing what must grow, protecting the soil. At its core, this principle reminds you that the tone of your inner world sets the tone of your entire life. If your self-talk is cruel, your world becomes hostile. If your self-talk is chaotic, your world becomes unstable. But if your self-talk is steady, firm and wise, then even when the world shakes, you do not. As this chapter softens into its closing breath, let one truth settle deeply beneath your ribs. The words you speak to yourself are building something inside you every day. Make sure they build strength, not cracks. Make sure they build clarity, not confusion. Make sure they build the kind of inner world no chaos can enter uninvited. From here, we move into the next principle, where the Stoic path teaches not only how to guard your mind, but how to contain your emotions so deeply that no one, not friend, not enemy, not stranger, can use them against you. As we step into the 12th chapter, imagine a moment when the emotions inside you begin to rise like a tide, slow at first, then stronger, pressing against the edges of your composure. You feel it in the tightening of your throat, in the quickening of your breath, in the heat that spreads across your chest. It's the kind of feeling that wants to spill out before you even understand it. And this is where the next Stoic principle emerges with unmistakable clarity. The art of emotional containment, not suppression, not denial. Containment, holding your inner world with steady hands so no one else can shake it loose. From here, imagine a scene you've lived before. Someone says something careless, someone forgets something important, someone reacts without thinking. You feel something sharp waking up inside you. Maybe it's hurt, maybe it's frustration, maybe it's fear. Most people release those emotions instantly, like a reflex. But the Stoics learned something different, something powerful. You do not owe the world your rawness. You do not owe everyone your trembling. You do not need to bleed in public for the sake of appearing honest. Some emotions are meant to be held, understood, processed, not displayed. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that the mind should be like a calm citadel, fortified, self-contained, unshaken by the winds that roar outside. He didn't tell himself to be emotionless. He told himself to be sovereign, to feel deeply but reveal selectively, to understand that power lives not in exposure but in restraint. I once knew someone who shared their emotions too freely. If they were upset, the world knew. If they were afraid, their voice shook. If they felt insecure, they announced it in a dozen different ways. For a long time, they believed this was authenticity. But then life taught them the other side of the coin. Not everyone holds your emotions with care. Some people take your vulnerability as permission to push further. Some use your reactions as leverage. Some treat your openness as weakness. And after being hurt too many times, this person realized what the Stoics realized centuries ago: your emotions are sacred. Not secrets, sacred. And sacred things are not handed to strangers. At this stage, imagine your emotions as a flame cupped in your hands. When you expose it too quickly, the wind destroys it. When you hold it too tightly, you smother it. But when you contain it with balance, protected, steady, conscious, it becomes a source of light and warmth, not destruction. Epictetus taught that the first thing you must master is your own impulse to reveal everything. He said that nothing outside you deserves access to your inner storms unless you grant it. And the wise person grants access rarely, not out of coldness, out of understanding, out of discernment, out of self-respect. Let me give you another moment, a quiet one that carries a deep truth. A woman I knew once received devastating news in the middle of her workday. Her hands shook, her eyes burned, her breath caught in her throat. But she didn't collapse into the moment. She contained it. She stepped outside, stood beneath a tree, and breathed until the wave softened. Only then did she choose whom to confide in. Only then did she decide how to speak. And later she told me, if I had let that emotion spill everywhere, it would have controlled me. But by containing it, I chose my own timing. That is strength. Not the absence of emotion, the direction of it. Containment does not make you cold. It makes you powerful. It gives you space to think before reacting. It allows you to understand what you feel instead of projecting it outward. It turns emotional chaos into inner clarity. And clarity is the foundation of calm. Seneca warned that those who reveal too much of their emotional life become easy targets for any passing cruelty. He wasn't telling people to become stone. He was telling them to understand the cost of being entirely visible. When your emotions are uncontained, anyone can press the wrong button and watch you break. But when your emotions are held consciously, the world can push, but it cannot crack you. Imagine now how many conflicts in your life erupted because your emotions rose faster than your awareness. How many regrets were born from reactions that weren't filtered? How many moments spiraled because you opened your inner world before understanding what lived inside it? Containment is not the cage. It is the container, a vessel, a boundary, a way of saying, I honor what I feel, but I decide when and how I express it. And when you live from this place, everything changes. People no longer read you like an open book. They cannot predict your reactions. They cannot weaponize your vulnerability. They cannot use your emotions against you. Instead, they begin to see you as someone steady, someone grounded, someone whose presence calms the air around them. This is where emotional containment becomes something more than a practice. It becomes a presence, a force, a way of moving through life with dignity intact. As this chapter settles into its quiet close, let one truth settle with it. The world should not have the blueprint to your emotions. Your inner world belongs to you first. When you learn to contain what rises within you, you no longer fear your own feelings, and therefore you no longer fear the world. From here, we move into the next principle, where the Stoic path leads you to an even deeper mastery. Not only containing emotion, but understanding the present moment so sharply that your calm becomes unbreakable. As we step into the 13th chapter, imagine a moment when the world around you suddenly feels heavier than it should be, not because something dramatic happened, but because your mind has drifted away from the present. You find yourself pulled into a memory that wounds you, or a future that exhausts you before it even arrives. The body is here, but the mind has wandered into battlefields that do not exist. And this is where the next Stoic principle appears with quiet force. Return to the present moment, because calmness cannot live anywhere else. From here, picture yourself sitting in a room while your thoughts race ahead of you. Maybe you're replaying a conversation that ended hours ago, arguing with someone who isn't here to hear it. Maybe you're worrying about something that might happen tomorrow, carrying a weight that hasn't been given to you yet. The Stoics saw this clearly. The mind creates storms long before the sky shows clouds. And most suffering is born not from life, but from leaving the moment you are standing in. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that the present is enough, not the past, not the imagined future. This moment, the one you can touch, the one you can see, the one you can influence. He wrote that the mind must learn to return to itself the way a traveler returns home after drifting too far from the path. And you feel the truth of that, don't you? How often have you lost your calm, not because of what was happening, but because of what you thought might happen? How often has your peace been stolen by ghosts, memories, fears, expectations? I once knew a man who lived in constant anticipation of disaster. Every day was a preparation for something that never came. His mind jumped between fears the way a flame jumps between branches. He could not rest. He could not enjoy simple moments. He couldn't feel the warmth of the present because he was too busy bracing for the future. One afternoon, while sitting with an older mentor, he confessed this restlessness. The older man listened and finally said, "You keep living in a world that is not happening." That line cracked something open inside him. From that day on, he practiced anchoring himself in the tasks of the moment. And with time, he realized the present had always been far kinder than the places his mind kept dragging him. At this stage, imagine your thoughts as travelers wandering through time into what has ended and into what has not yet begun. The Stoic task is to call them back, to say, "Stay here, because only here can you act, only here can you breathe, only here can you be steady." When you return your mind to what is in front of you, worry dissolves, fear softens, regret loses its grip. Epictetus taught that we should not afflict ourselves with imagined troubles, for life already brings enough real ones. He was telling us not to abandon the moment in search of suffering that hasn't yet arrived. To live in the present is not to ignore the future, it is to refuse to drown in it before you reach it. Let me share another story. A woman I once knew struggled with replaying painful moments from her past. Even when her life was calm, her mind wandered back to times when she wasn't treated well, or wasn't understood, or wasn't valued. Those memories pulled her out of the present, like a hand gripping her shoulder from behind. One day, she learned a practice inspired by the Stoics. Whenever her thoughts drifted backward, she would pause, place a hand over her heart, and say, "That moment is gone. I am here." Slowly, the past loosened its hold. She began noticing the sunlight on her skin, the taste of her morning tea, the sound of her own breath. Her calm didn't come from forgetting, it came from returning. When you live in the present, problems shrink to their true size. When you leave the present, they grow into monsters. Seneca wrote that life is divided into 3 parts: what was, what will be, and what is. And of the 3, only the present belongs to us. The others are illusions, one called memory, one called imagination. And yet we pour our energy into those illusions as if they determine who we are. The Stoics remind us that peace is here, not there. Now, not then. Returning to the present moment is not an escape. It is a homecoming. It is the act of reclaiming your breath from the grip of anxiety. It is the act of lifting your attention from imagined chaos to real simplicity. It is the act of grounding yourself in the only place where strength can actually be built, the moment before you. And here is the truth that ties this chapter together. The mind that lives fully in the present cannot be shaken. Fear loses its future. Regret loses its past. Pain loses its echo. What remains is clarity, clean, quiet, unpolluted clarity. Imagine walking through your life anchored so deeply in the present that nothing pulls you away. Not someone's tone, not someone's mistake, not your own uncertainty. You respond slowly, intentionally, not from memory, not from fear, but from awareness. The present moment is a shield. When you return to it, you return to your center. As this chapter settles, let one final truth rest within you. Calmness lives only where your feet touch the ground. Not in yesterday, not in tomorrow, only here. From here, we move into the next principle, where the Stoic path sharpens further, toward the understanding that when nothing external can truly harm you, your calm becomes something the world cannot break. As we step into the 14th chapter, imagine a moment when someone's chaos stands inches from your calm, like a storm pressing its face against the window of your inner world. Their voice sharpens, their movements intensify, their frustration spills outward in all directions. And yet something in you remains still, not because you're distant, but because you finally understand a truth the Stoics carved into the bedrock of their philosophy. Nothing external can truly harm you unless you let it through the gates of your mind. From here, picture yourself walking through a crowded space where people clash, complain, push and pull. Some are angry at life, some are angry at themselves, some don't even know why they're angry at all. Their energy moves like smoke, thick, suffocating, searching for somewhere to stick. And for most people it does. But imagine yourself walking through that same space with a different awareness, seeing each emotion, each reaction, each sharp tone for what it is. External, outside, not yours, not personal, not powerful unless you grant it power. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. He did not say the soul becomes dyed by the behavior of others. He meant that what touches your inner world is determined by what you allow inside. And once you grasp that distinction, the world loses its ability to wound you. People may shout, circumstances may shift, events may disappoint, but your core remains intact, untouched, unbroken. I once knew a man who felt deeply wounded by the slightest criticism. Praise lifted him, but disapproval crushed him. He lived like a leaf in the wind, blown upward one moment, dragged into the dirt the next. One day, after a particularly harsh conflict, he told an older mentor, "Everything gets to me." The mentor simply replied, "That's because you open the door every time someone knocks." The silence that followed was long, almost painful, but the truth was undeniable. The man had mistaken openness for vulnerability and vulnerability for identity. He had allowed the world to define his inner weather. It took him years to understand what the Stoics taught plainly. If you let every emotion from the outside world enter, you will never find peace in the inside one. At this stage, imagine your mind as a courtyard with a single gate. People can shout from outside the walls, they can throw opinions over, they can bang on the door until their hands bleed, but only you decide who enters. And if you choose carefully, if you guard your gate with clarity and calm, then nothing external can reach your center. Nothing. Epictetus told his students that the world is not harmful, only our interpretation of it is. He meant that events are neutral until you assign them meaning. Words are harmless until you accept them as truth. Criticism is powerless until you grant it authority. And the moment you stop granting that authority, the world exerts no force on your emotional state. Let me give you another story, one that reveals this principle in full color. A woman I once worked with faced constant disrespect from a superior. Sharp comments, dismissive gestures, public interruptions. Each day she left work feeling smaller than she started. But after studying Stoic principles, she changed one thing. She stopped absorbing his behavior into her identity. When he criticized her, she reminded herself, that is his voice, not mine. When he tried to provoke her, she thought, this is his storm, not mine. And little by little, the attacks lost their sting. They bounced off her instead of sinking in. One day, someone asked how she stayed so composed. She answered softly, I finally realized his opinion cannot build me, so it cannot break me. That is the essence of this chapter. The world can touch your body. It can disrupt your schedule. It can affect your plans, but it cannot touch your mind without permission. And that permission is yours to give or withhold. Seneca warned that we suffer more in imagination than reality. Most of what feels like pain is simply the story you tell yourself about what someone else did. Remove the story and the pain dissolves. Remove the assumption and the hurt evaporates. Remove the personal attachment and the attack becomes nothing more than noise. This principle does not make you indifferent. It makes you invincible. It grants you the freedom to walk through harshness without absorbing it, to witness other people's storms without being pulled into their winds, to remain yourself in a world that constantly tries to turn you into someone else. And here is the deepest truth. Once you understand that external forces cannot harm your inner life, calmness becomes your natural state. You stop fighting battles that never belong to you. You stop internalizing words spoken from another person's pain. You stop pretending that every difficulty is aimed at your heart. You begin to see life clearly without emotional distortion. Imagine moving through your day with that strength. Someone insults you and you feel nothing but clarity. Someone dismisses you and your worth remains untouched. Someone tries to provoke you and you stand unmoved. Because your calm is not a reaction, it is your default. As this chapter settles into its final breath, let one truth settle deeply into your bones. Nothing external can break you unless you hand it the hammer. The world may roar, but your mind is yours. Guard it, guide it, and chaos passes, but you remain. From here, we move into the next principle, where calmness evolves into identity, and you learn what it means to become someone unshakable, not because the world is gentle, but because you no longer bend. As we step into the 15th chapter, imagine a moment when you finally stop running from yourself. The noise outside fades, the opinions quiet down, the expectations loosen their grip. And you stand there, face to face with the truth that has been trying to reach you through every difficulty, every disappointment, every moment that shook you. Calmness is not something you practice occasionally, it is something you become. This chapter is the turning point where discipline becomes identity, where the work you have done inside begins to reshape the person you are outside. From here, imagine waking up one morning and feeling an unfamiliar steadiness in your chest. The kind that doesn't depend on circumstances or approval or predictability. A steadiness that comes from building yourself from the inside out, brick by brick, habit by habit, principle by principle. You step into your day, and the same challenges arrive, the same personalities appear, the same unpredictability unfolds. But you're not the same. You move differently. You respond differently. You carry yourself with the quiet certainty of someone who knows their mind is their kingdom and their peace is their responsibility. Marcus Aurelius wrote that a person becomes unstoppable when they realize they need nothing outside themselves to live a good life. He meant that calmness is not borrowed from the world. It is cultivated, it is earned, it is built through the daily practice of choosing mastery over impulse, clarity over noise, virtue over reaction. And when that practice becomes who you are, something extraordinary happens. You no longer fear the world. You no longer fear people's judgments. You no longer fear difficulty. Because you've become someone who can handle life as it comes. I once knew a man who had spent most of his life reactive, quick to anger, quick to defend himself, quick to collapse under pressure. His emotions owned him. His calm flickered like a weak flame. But over the years he began studying the Stoics, not in theory, but in living. He practiced pausing, observing, breathing, preparing. He learned not to hand his peace to other people. He trained his mind to remain still, even when the world was not. And one day, something subtle but powerful shifted. A friend told him, "You've changed. You're not easily shaken anymore." And he smiled, not with pride, but with recognition. He had finally become the person he had always tried to pretend to be. That is what this chapter is about, becoming unrecognizable to the untrained version of yourself. Becoming someone whose calm doesn't depend on mood or luck or circumstance. Becoming someone who radiates steadiness like a lighthouse in a storm. At this stage, imagine standing in front of a mirror, not the kind that shows your face, but the kind that reflects your character. Look closely. What do you see? A person shaped accidentally by the world, or a person shaped deliberately by themselves? A person who bends at every gust of emotion, or a person who holds their ground like a rooted tree? The Stoics believed that calmness is the final form of self-respect. When you cultivate calm, you are saying to yourself, "I refuse to be ruled from the outside." Seneca said that no one can live a peaceful life unless the mind is at peace. And the mind cannot be at peace unless it learns to be its own master. This mastery is not a mask, it is a transformation. It is the slow strengthening of your inner foundation until you can walk through noise without becoming noise, walk through conflict without becoming conflict, walk through chaos without becoming chaos. Let me share a moment with you, quiet but unforgettable. A woman I once knew faced a difficult confrontation with someone who tried to provoke her, the kind of person who feeds on reaction. In the past, she would have argued, defended, explained, but this time she listened, she breathed, she stayed still, and she said only, "I hear you." No defense, no apology, no battle. The other person grew frustrated, angry even, because their chaos no longer found a host. Afterward, she told me, "I didn't win the argument. I won myself." That is unshakable calm. That is identity, not strategy. And here is where the principle crystallizes. Becoming unshakable doesn't mean you feel nothing. It means you're no longer governed by what you feel. It means your peace is not fragile. It means your self-worth is not negotiable. It means you know who you are, even when the world tries to tell you otherwise. When calm becomes identity, you stop being a participant in every battle, every drama, every emotional storm. You choose your engagements carefully. You choose your reactions deliberately. You choose yourself consistently. Imagine living with that certainty. Imagine moving through your day with the grounded confidence of someone who cannot be pulled out of themselves. Imagine being someone whose presence stabilizes the room instead of dissolving into it. This is the highest form of Stoic practice, not just surviving life, but shaping yourself into someone who stands firm through it. As this chapter draws to its quiet close, let one truth settle deep within you. Calmness is not something you chase. It is something you become through every choice to pause instead of rush, observe instead of react, stand instead of collapse. Every principle you've learned until now has led you here to the person you were meant to grow into. From here, we step beyond the 15 principles and into the wider path. The one where calm stops being a technique and becomes the way you move through the world. As we arrive at this quiet threshold, you may notice something has shifted. Each principle has fortified a part of you that once felt fragile. Your reactions slower, your thoughts clearer, your center no longer wavers. And from this new steadiness comes a question. What does calmness begin to build once it becomes part of who you are? This is where the journey deepens, where calm transforms from something you defend into something that shapes your presence, where your inner balance starts to create influence, clarity, and a quiet power others can feel without you saying a word. Now, with the foundation laid and your inner ground firm, we step into the next layer, the space where calmness reveals what it can become once it has taken root within you. As we step into this new chapter, imagine a silence that doesn't feel empty but powerful. The silence after someone tries to provoke you and nothing inside you moves. Not because you're avoiding the moment, but because you've grown beyond the reach of old triggers. Your calm no longer flickers. It stands. And in that stillness, something unexpected begins to form. Influence, the kind that needs no force, no volume, only presence. From here, picture yourself in a room where everyone is reacting to everyone else. Impulses bouncing like sparks, words flying too quickly, tension thick enough to touch. And yet you sit there, steady, breathing slowly, your presence anchored like a stone in a rushing river. You're not above anyone, you're not pretending, you're simply centered, and something shifts. People begin to look toward you, not for permission, but for direction. They adjust their tone around you, their volume softens, their movements settle. Because calmness has a gravity of its own, it pulls turmoil into order, it draws scattered minds back to ground. Marcus Aurelius understood this deeply. He wrote that the inner life of a disciplined mind becomes a guiding light for others, even if no words are spoken. He meant that strength doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it radiates through self-possession. Sometimes it's in the way you listen. Sometimes it's in the way you refuse to enter battles that have nothing to do with truth. I once watched a leader who embodied this without ever trying. During a crisis that left everyone scrambling, raising their voices, pointing fingers, he remained calm, not in a detached or dismissive way, but with a seriousness that steadied the room. People gravitated toward him because he was the only one who didn't panic. He asked simple questions, clear questions, and suddenly what felt overwhelming became manageable. Afterward, someone said, "He didn't do much," but the truth was, he did everything. His calm was the anchor that kept everyone else from drifting into chaos. At this stage, imagine what it means to become that anchor, not for recognition, not for power, but because you've learned to govern yourself so well that others find refuge in your steadiness. Calmness becomes a form of guidance. It becomes a quiet leadership that requires no title. You don't need to command anyone. Your presence does the work. Seneca once wrote that those who master themselves become natural rulers of any situation. He didn't mean domination, he meant clarity. He meant that people instinctively trust the person who is hardest to shake. They instinctively respect the person who is not enslaved by impulse. They instinctively follow the person who can see clearly while everyone else is blinded by emotion. Let me give you a moment that brings this truth into sharp focus. A woman I knew worked in an environment full of heated opinions and clashing personalities. Meetings often turned into arguments. People talked over each other constantly. But she earned respect not by winning debates, not by speaking the loudest, but by holding herself with quiet conviction. When voices rose, hers didn't. When tempers flared, hers didn't. When others reacted defensively, she paused, listened, responded with intention, and slowly, without ever asking for it, she became the person people listened to. Not because she demanded it, because she embodied what everyone else lacked: stillness. Influence is not loud. Influence is steady. And here's where this truth deepens. When you cultivate calm long enough, something transformative happens. People stop trying to shake you and start trying to steady themselves around you. Your peace becomes contagious. Your restraint becomes instructive. Your self-command becomes an unspoken invitation for others to rise to your level. You change the atmosphere without forcing anything. This kind of influence is the natural consequence of inner work. It is what emerges when you have built discipline, contained your emotions, guarded your thoughts, returned to the present, and refused to hand your peace to external forces. The world senses when someone is no longer ruled by chaos. It senses when someone has claimed their own mind, and it takes that person seriously. Imagine carrying that presence into your relationships. Instead of reacting to criticism, you listen with clarity. Instead of absorbing someone else's stress, you remain centered. Instead of matching someone's anger, you offer stillness. You become the grounding force that the people you care about didn't know they needed. Imagine carrying it into conflict. Instead of escalating, you diffuse. Instead of defending, you discern. Instead of proving, you act with purpose. This is not submission. This is mastery. And imagine carrying it into your daily life. At the store, in traffic, at work, online, in conversations. You walk through the world like someone who knows their worth without announcing it. People feel that. They adjust. Calmness becomes authority. As this chapter settles, let one truth settle with it. Influence does not come from dominance. It comes from self-governance. The moment you stop being shaken by the world begins to lean toward you. And from here, we move into the next insight, where clarity sharpens into strategy, and the strength you've cultivated within begins shaping the choices you make without. Advancing into this next chapter, imagine discovering a new depth within your calmness, the kind of quiet that doesn't merely protect you from chaos, but begins to reveal the hidden structure beneath every moment. It's like stepping into a room where the noise has finally settled, and for the first time, you can see clearly how things move, why people react, and where situations are quietly guiding you. This clarity wasn't possible before. It wasn't available when emotions still held their grip, when you were tangled in reactions, when every moment demanded an answer before you had time to breathe. But now, something else is happening. Your calm has matured into something sharper, something more refined, a new kind of intelligence born not from overthinking, but from stillness. Now imagine standing at the edge of a decision that would have once overwhelmed you, the kind that used to ignite your anxiety or trigger your impatience. Before, your thoughts might have raced ahead, filling your mind with pressure or fear. But now, instead of rushing, you allow the moment to open. You take one slow breath. The world seems to separate into layers. You see the surface, what is being said, what appears obvious, but you also see beneath it. You sense motives, you detect tension, you feel the undercurrent. You recognize patterns you were once too reactive to notice, and from this place, you don't just respond, you choose. You think in longer lines. You see wider angles. Calmness has given you height. Marcus Aurelius hinted at this kind of vision when he wrote that the mind, once grounded, becomes capable of surveying the world from above, untouched by the storms below. He wasn't speaking of superiority, he was speaking of clarity, the kind you earn only after you stop living in your emotional reflexes. The mind that no longer trembles begins to perceive what is truly happening, not what fear or frustration suggests is happening. I once knew someone who lived for years in a constant state of mental fog. Every challenge felt urgent. Every conflict felt personal. Every unexpected twist felt catastrophic. But when he learned to steady his inner world, something astonishing happened. He told me, "It's like someone lifted a veil, but the veil wasn't lifted, it dissolved. His calmness washed it away." Now, when he looked at problems, he saw their shape, he saw their timing, he saw the openings and the traps. Not because he became smarter, but because he stopped being overwhelmed. At this stage, imagine holding a challenge in your hands the way a craftsman studies raw material. You're not rushing to cut or force or reshape it. You're reading it, feeling it, learning where it bends and where it breaks. And because you're not flooded with emotion, you can recognize the grain of the situation, the subtle lines that show you how to move without friction, where to stand firm, where to yield, where to wait. Seneca wrote that a mind in turmoil sees everything through distortion, but the mind at peace sees truth. And truth, once seen, becomes strategy. Let me share a moment that reveals this transformation. A woman I once knew worked in a demanding environment where snap decisions determined consequences for many people. When she was younger and reactive, her choices were often tangled in panic, insecurity, or the desire to please. But as she grew calmer, she found she could wait just a fraction longer than everyone else. That fraction became her advantage. When others rushed to answer, she observed. When others panicked, she calculated. When others tangled themselves in emotion, she stepped outside it and looked from the edges. Her calm didn't make her slow, it made her precise. And people began to seek her counsel, not because she had more information, but because she saw what they couldn't. This is the quiet evolution of a steady mind. Emotion once narrowed your vision, but now your vision expands because emotion no longer leads. The unsettled person sees only the next move. The calm person sees the pattern. The calm person sees the timing. The calm person sees the path. And here is where this lesson deepens. Emotional detachment doesn't make you indifferent. It makes you effective. It allows you to read the intentions behind someone's words, not just the words themselves. It lets you recognize manipulation before it forms its trap. It helps you sense the hesitation behind someone's confidence, the insecurity behind someone's aggression, the fear behind someone's cruelty. You begin to understand people not by what they show, but by what they try to hide. Calmness becomes insight. Insight becomes foresight. And foresight becomes power, not the kind that dominates others, but the kind that allows you to navigate life with competence and confidence. As this chapter settles into its final breath, let one truth anchor itself within you. When your emotions no longer control your vision finally becomes worthy of guiding your life. And from here, you step into something even deeper, where the steadiness you've cultivated doesn't just shape your perception. It begins to change the way others respond to you without a single word being spoken. Advancing into this next chapter, imagine a moment where you enter a room and nothing about you announces itself, yet everything about you is felt. Not because you are louder, stronger, or more forceful than anyone else, but because something in you has settled into a different depth. A depth that cannot be faked. A depth that cannot be imitated. A depth that comes from the inner discipline you've built piece by piece. This is where the calm you've cultivated stops being only for you and begins shaping the world around you in ways you never intended but inevitably create. From here, picture the quiet shift that happens when a person no longer reacts to provocation. It's almost invisible at first. Someone raises their voice at you, and you don't rise to meet it. Someone rolls their eyes, and you don't internalize it. Someone speaks to you with impatience, and nothing in your chest tightens. You remain steady, unmoved, whole. And because you remain whole, something subtle begins to change in them. Their aggression loses its fuel. Their tone softens. Their frustration dissolves into confusion, then into calm. They adjust themselves to match the ground you're standing on. This is the moment you realize something profound. Your calm has become a mirror that reveals other people to themselves. Marcus Aurelius understood this force well. He reminded himself daily that the best way to correct another person was not through resistance or retaliation, but through example. A steady soul exposes the instability in others. A patient voice reveals the impatience in others. A quiet presence reveals the noise they carry within. And often, without you commanding anything, people change simply by standing in the presence of someone who refuses to descend into their storm. I once watched a man experience this without even realizing it. He was the kind of person who rarely spoke, not out of weakness, but because he listened deeply. His self-control was quiet but unmistakable. In heated discussions, he didn't interrupt. In moments of tension, he didn't defend. In situations where others panicked, he remained still. And something fascinating happened over time. People began lowering their voices before speaking to him. They stopped using harsh language. They explained themselves more carefully. They slowed down. They respected a boundary he never verbally expressed. His silence wasn't empty. It was instructive. It recalibrated the room. At this stage, imagine how powerful it is to influence people not through authority or pressure, but through composure. When your presence communicates, "I cannot be shaken," others instinctively bring their better selves forward. They sense the dignity you carry. They sense the restraint you value. And because humans naturally mirror the emotional climate around them, they begin to align themselves with your steadiness. This doesn't mean everyone will behave perfectly, but it means that your calm no longer serves only as protection. It becomes guidance. Seneca wrote that nothing commands respect more than the person who governs their own mind. He wasn't speaking about superiority, he was speaking about example. People follow what they feel more than what they hear. When they feel grounded around you, they trust you. When they feel safe around you, they open to you. When they feel seen instead of judged, they elevate themselves. Let me give you another moment that captures this truth. A woman I once knew had spent years defending herself against criticism, misunderstandings, or negativity. She would argue, explain, justify, exhausting herself trying to control how others perceived her. But as she grew in self-mastery, something changed. One day, when someone harshly misjudged her, she did not respond, not out of bitterness, but because she no longer needed to. The silence she held was not cold, it was certain. And in that certainty, the other person became aware of their own harshness. They corrected themselves, they apologized. The absence of her reaction revealed the excess of theirs. That is the power of inner composure. It exposes what is unnecessary. Here's where this evolution deepens. When you no longer react to people's moods, you free them from the need to defend or attack. When you no longer take things personally, you free them from the reflex of hostility. When you no longer participate in emotional chaos, you free them to rise into clarity. Without trying, you lead. Without speaking, you teach. Without imposing, you influence. And imagine how this changes the dynamics around you. Arguments shorten because you aren't feeding them. Manipulators lose interest because you offer no emotional leverage. Aggressive people soften because their energy finds no resistance to push against. Even insecure people begin to stabilize because your non-reactivity gives them a model of roundedness they never had. This is not about superiority. This is about alignment. Your calm becomes a tuning fork that brings other people into balance. You don't force change. You inspire it through who you are becoming. As this chapter finds its quiet close, let one truth settle deeply. The greatest influence comes not from control, but from presence. And the person who masters themselves becomes the person others instinctively respect, soften toward, and rise around. And from here, we step into the next unfolding layer, where calm not only guides others, but begins transforming the way you meet adversity itself, turning every challenge into a proving ground for the strength you have built within. Advancing into this next chapter, imagine a moment when life throws something at you that once would have knocked the wind out of you. Not a small inconvenience, but something that lands with weight. A sudden change, a harsh comment, a failed effort, an unexpected loss. In the past, you might have spiraled. You might have taken it personally, interpreted it as unfair, or let it break your rhythm. But now, after everything you have learned and strengthened, something different happens. The shock arrives, yet your center holds. You feel the impact, but you don't collapse under it. Instead, you stand there in the quiet aftermath, breathing steadily, realizing that adversity no longer means the same thing it used to. This is where calm sharpens into resilience, where stillness meets reality and reveals its deeper purpose. From here, imagine the first seconds after something goes wrong. The world pauses. Your heart beats louder. Your thoughts begin to scatter. You feel the old instincts rising, the rush to fix, the urge to defend, the temptation to blame. But then a new instinct emerges, one you've practiced without even realizing. The instinct to step back, to observe, to let the moment settle before you move. This pause, brief as it is, becomes your shield. It prevents you from sinking into panic or anger. It creates space for understanding. It gives you time to see the challenge not as an attack, but as information. You're no longer at the mercy of the event. You are meeting it on your terms. Marcus Aurelius faced endless burdens as an emperor, yet he wrote with a clarity that feels almost impossible. He reminded himself daily that obstacles were not roadblocks, but raw material for growth. He didn't say every hardship was good. He said every hardship could be used. And that shift in perspective is the quiet revolution happening within you now. Adversity doesn't shrink, but your relationship to it changes. The fear in it dissolves. The urgency softens. What remains is the question, how can I use this? I once knew a man who struggled deeply with disappointment. When things didn't go his way, even small setbacks, they pierced him. He saw them as personal failures, as judgments on his worth. But as he grew more grounded, something remarkable began to unfold. He stopped seeing every setback as a verdict. Instead, he began to see them as invitations. Invitations to strengthen, adapt, rethink, reset. One day he told me, "I don't break as easily anymore." And he wasn't boasting. He was acknowledging the quiet transformation that takes place when a person no longer reacts from fear, but from understanding. At this stage, imagine adversity as a weight placed in your hands. Before, it would have crushed your grip. Now, you adjust. You position your stance. You carry it with intention. You learn its shape and its pressure. You begin to see that every difficulty has a different lesson etched into it. Some teach patience. Some teach courage. Some teach humility. Some teach strategy. And some teach you what you no longer need to carry. The Stoics believed that adversity was not a punishment, but a teacher, sometimes harsh, but always precise. Seneca wrote that a person who has never faced difficulty is like a warrior who has never trained. Their armor may shine, but it has never been tested. Their strength may look impressive, but it has never met resistance. True resilience is forged in friction. And you can feel that truth settling into your bones now. The challenges you face no longer throw you off balance because you've learned to anchor yourself internally instead of depending on external stability. You are no longer asking, "Why is this happening to me?" You are asking, "What can I learn from this? What can I become because of this?" Let me give you another moment that reveals this shift. A woman I once knew suffered a painful betrayal by someone she deeply trusted. For weeks, she was consumed by the hurt, the confusion, the disbelief. But something profound happened when she applied the Stoic discipline she had been studying. Instead of asking why someone could treat her that way, she asked who she needed to become so she would never crumble like that again. Her pain didn't disappear, but it transformed. It became a mirror reflecting not her weakness, but her strength waiting to be awakened. A year later, she said, "That moment didn't break me, it built me." And she meant it. This is what adversity becomes when met with calm. A forge, a sharpening stone, a place where the untested parts of you meet the necessary pressure to become stronger. You don't welcome hardship, but you don't fear it anymore. You recognize it as the training ground for the person you are becoming. And imagine how powerful this makes you. A person who can face discomfort without collapsing. A person who can face uncertainty without panicking. A person who can face hostility without losing their center. This is strength, not the loud, performative kind, but the kind that moves quietly through the world with unshakable self-trust. As this chapter settles into its final breath, let one truth carve itself deeply into your awareness. Adversity is not the enemy. Your panic was. And now that your panic has loosened its grip, hardship becomes something else entirely. It becomes raw material for growth, a sculptor shaping your character, a force that strengthens precisely the places that once felt fragile. And from here, we step into the next unfolding truth, where resilience matures into conviction, and the calm you've built becomes the foundation of a life guided not by fear, but by purpose. Advancing into this next chapter, imagine waking one morning with a clarity so steady it feels like the air around you has thickened, as if the world has slowed just enough for you to finally see what has always been there. You look at your life, not the surface of it, but the deeper layers, the patterns, the cycles, the moments you dismissed, the choices you avoided, the truths you were too busy or afraid to face. And instead of feeling overwhelmed, you feel ready. There is a grounded acceptance rising in you, the kind that doesn't collapse under truth, but stands taller because of it. This is where calmness matures into self-honesty, where the courage to look inward becomes the foundation for everything that follows. From here, imagine sitting alone with no distractions, no noise, no demands pulling at your attention. Just you, the unfiltered version. The one behind the roles you play, the habits you repeat, the defenses you built long ago to protect the fragile parts of yourself. In the past, this stillness might have frightened you. Being alone with your thoughts felt like opening a door to something uncontrolled. But now, after learning to contain your emotions, sharpen your perception, and steady your reactions, this quiet feels different. It feels like home. And in that home, a new kind of truth emerges, one that isn't harsh or punishing, but clarifying. You begin to see where you've held yourself back, where fear disguised itself as caution, where pride disguised itself as principle, where comfort disguised itself as peace. Marcus Aurelius wrote that no one can escape the responsibility of looking inward, for the soul carries its own light and its own shadows. He wasn't demanding perfection. He was inviting courage. The courage to examine the parts of ourselves we've ignored. The courage to stop pretending. The courage to see ourselves without distortion. When you finally develop this kind of calm, the truth no longer threatens you. It strengthens you. I once watched someone experience this transformation firsthand. For years, he blamed others for his frustrations, his co-workers, his relationships, his family, the world. Every disappointment had an external cause. Every setback was someone else's mistake. But when he learned to steady himself, something remarkable happened. He stopped pointing outward. He turned inward. And instead of finding shame or guilt, he found understanding. He realized he had been running from his own patterns. His anger wasn't about others. It was about fear. His defensiveness wasn't about attacks. It was about insecurity. His impatience wasn't about circumstances. It was about lack of discipline. And for the first time in his life, he looked at himself without collapsing. He said, "I didn't know how much of my suffering I created." And then he added, "But if I created it, I can change it." That is the freedom self-honesty gives you, agency. At this stage, imagine your inner world like a vast landscape. Some parts are well lit, familiar, comfortable. Others remain in shadow, old wounds, unspoken doubts, memories you packed away without unpacking their meaning. But now, you enter those shadows not as a frightened visitor, but as a careful observer. You're not here to judge. You're here to understand. You begin tracing your reactions back to their roots. You begin uncovering the beliefs that shaped your behavior. You begin seeing how your past shaped your present, not to stay trapped in it, but to finally release its influence. Seneca wrote that the greatest journey a person can take is the journey within, for until you understand yourself, you remain a stranger to your own life. And this journey becomes possible only when calmness gives you the courage to face what you once avoided. The truth doesn't break you. Avoiding it does. Let me share another moment that reveals the beauty of this transformation. A woman I once knew carried silent resentment for years toward someone who had hurt her. She believed the resentment empowered her, protected her, justified her distance. But as she grew emotionally grounded, she began examining that resentment with new eyes. She saw that it didn't protect her, it imprisoned her, it locked her into a version of herself she no longer wanted to be. And one day, she realized the truth. Forgiveness was not about absolving the other person. It was about freeing herself from the weight she had carried. She said, "I didn't forgive because they deserved it. I forgave because I deserved peace." That shift did not come from emotional impulse. It came from calm self-honesty. This is where your inner journey deepens into maturity, when calmness allows you to look at your flaws without shame, your strengths without arrogance, your past without fear, your future without desperation. Something extraordinary happens. You begin to rebuild yourself intentionally. Not from wounds, not from habits, from clarity. Imagine carrying this clarity into your relationships. You communicate without hidden motives. You listen without defensiveness. You apologize without fear. You stand your ground without hostility. People feel the difference because you're no longer reacting from unexamined wounds. You're responding from awareness. Imagine carrying it into your goals. You no longer chase approval or validation. You no longer quit because of setbacks. You no longer sabotage yourself. You commit because you've understood what truly matters and what no longer does. And imagine carrying it into your growth. You stop pretending you don't know what you need to change. You stop running from discomfort. You stop hiding behind excuses. You meet yourself fully, even the parts that once felt too heavy to face. As this chapter closes, let one truth settle deeply within you. Calmness gives you the courage to be honest with yourself, and self-honesty gives you the power to transform your life from the inside out. From here, you step into the next unfolding realization, where the calm, clarity, and inner truth you've cultivated begin shaping not just your reactions or your resilience, but the identity you grow into next. As we reach this quiet moment, let your mind rest on one simple truth. Calm is not something you chase. It is something you grow, choice by choice, thought by thought, breath by breath. If even one idea today helped you feel a little steadier, let that feeling stay with you when life tries to pull you away from yourself. If you wish to keep walking this path with me, you can subscribe so you never lose momentum. And before you go, share your voice below with the words, "Stay calm." You are stronger than you think, and the next lesson is already waiting to meet